Public affairs, I feel like it shaped me in a way that I wouldn't have gotten anywhere else without something dramatic happening. And of course, Marine Corps is dramatic in every sense of the word. So you get on them yellow footsteps, it's dramatic.
Hello, this is Tab Bartley, and you are listening to the Oath We Took podcast, the show that tells the Marine Corps story through the Marines that served. I'm joined today by Antwaun Jefferson. He is the reason for this podcast. I know so many amazing Marines who hesitate to tell their stories. Their stories hold so much power and so many life lessons. Oftentimes, though, they go untold. Not every Marine story is the same. What is the same is the oath that we all took. This week, I'm honored to have Jefferson on the podcast to share a piece of his story. And this morning and last night, when I was thinking about what story am I going to tell about Jefferson, it was like the amount of stories I have. So first and foremost, I have to say, if you've listened to previous episodes, you've heard Capers. Me, Capers, and Jefferson were like the three amigos. We went everywhere and did everything together. And since it's close to the new year, I always have to mention, or I feel like I need to talk about our New Year's tradition of playing Monopoly, getting angry at each other, always ending up somehow at the duty asking them who's right, who's wrong on this Monopoly, like you fair and square. And so that's the first story. But thank you so much for joining me on this podcast.
Anytime you need me, I'm there for you, sis. I got you.
And I have to say, Jefferson is, gosh, and I'm already getting emotional, and I knew I would, but I have to say that, like, when people talk about their Marine Corps experience, there's people that kind of like make it or break it. And Jefferson is, I can honestly say, the relationship we had is the reason why my Marine Corps career was such a positive one. And my experience, as a young PFC, Lance Corporal, and just everything that life throws at you as a junior Marine, I can't thank you enough for your relationship and friendship and brotherhood, sisterhood, siblinghood. So the first question I always ask is, why did you decide to join the Marine Corps?
Oof. Oh, so it's not as bad as the game we used to play at the Mardet. If you really knew me, it's not that bad, but it's more of just trying to do something new. Back in 2009, 10, stuff was getting a little expensive. I'm going to college for the first time, and classes are at that time about $1,200 per class, coming out right out of pocket. It was just a lot. I did one semester, was like, okay, it's not bad. Second semester was like, I'm a little broke right now. So that was one of the biggest reasons I needed free education, because out of pocket plus paying for health insurance, just regular life stuff was just too much for me at 18, 19 years old. So joining 2010, one of the biggest reasons was because of that. But the second reason is because I did have a long-term on and off girlfriend at the time. And when I say it was toxic, it was super toxic. And so that was probably the second biggest reason why I joined. Funny enough, I actually wanted to join the Air Force at first. And so I contacted the Marine Corps and Air Force at the same time, on the same day. Marine Corps came to my house, my physical location, within like 2 hours. The recruiter was like, hey, get in. And then, no stranger danger enough. Just hop in. We went from there. Air Force got back to me, I want to say about 6-7 months after I got to Quantico. So, and they were like, hey, I heard you want to join. I was like, yeah, you're a little over a year late now. So those are the reasons I joined, and with its ups and downs, I'm so happy I did, especially at that age. So happy.
Which I think is something really unique, because although a lot of people do join for the education, a lot of people don't join the Marine Corps because it's the hardest. So if that's their reason, that they're looking for education, Marine Corps is normally not the route they go, even though they contacted you. So what else about the Marine Corps? Because obviously it was something else besides that they just were in, what was your initial, impression of the Marine Corps?
So luckily I had a few high school buddies that already went to the Marine Corps. So they were telling me, all the things they would do overall. Now I will say, they didn't tell me about recruit training as much as they should have. But everything else was really, really nice. So that helped guide my decision. Plus, my first job, I worked at a place called Heidi's Brooklyn Deli, and I loved the job. And the manager at the time, he was a Army veteran. He back in like the 70s, and he was like, "Hey, I see where your life is going. We talked about a lot of things. I think the military route is the best thing for you." And he literally walked me through the whole process. And if it wasn't for him, honestly, I don't know if I would have joined the Marine Corps. I mean, I would have waited that year and a half for Air Force and things like that. So I, I know this is like for everybody. It only takes that one decision, that one person, that one event to change your whole outlook on life. And I would say, if it wasn't for him, honestly, I don't know where I'd be if I even would have joined.
Which I think is so crazy because like knowing you and knowing your personality, like you fit in the Marine Corps. Like it's not like I mean, very rarely do you meet people and you're like, how'd you end up in the Marine Corps? Do you know what I mean? There's been a few throughout my career that I'm like, I don't know how you made it here. But it's not that it like you have like a personality or anything like that, that it's like you don't act like a Marine. It's just like, I think that maybe the first time I knew that the education was like the super reason. And I knew you had talked to the Air Force, but I don't think I realized that that was literally your primary reason, which again normally doesn't happen in joining the Marine Corps. And did you pick public affairs? Was that the MOS you picked, or did it kind of happen?
So initially, my recruiter wanted me to go infantry, and I was like, "Yeah, no, that's not going to happen." I don't know too much, but I know don't do that. But so I think my ASVAB score was about 70 at the time, so they wavered me in for the 1 or 2 points you needed for public affairs. Now I did want to do broadcasting, when we got to Fort Meade.
And I knew that.
Yeah, but of course they only had like at that time like 2 or 3 slots per class, and I know my roommate at the time before, he was big on that. He was like, "Hey, I'm doing this, and then somebody came with the other person that got it that year, because I think I was probably like 4th runner up or something like that.
It was a female, right?
Yeah, it was a young woman. Yeah, at that time it was DeFore and a young woman, and of course I was happy for them, and I've definitely seen DeFore do his thing, on the outside. Now he's doing fantastic.
Yeah.
So I kind of, half of me is like, oh man, I wish I would have, got picked. But the other half is like, if I did get picked, I would have never met you, Ramos, Hayes, freaking Duncan, everybody, So it's one of those like bittersweet situations. Like it could have happened, but the way life turned out, I'm totally fine. Totally fine with that.
And again, I think for people who don't know, so the Defense Information School is where all of public affairs go. It's where combat camera goes. It's where artists go. It is a like internationally recognized schoolhouse. Like this place is like, they are the experts. Like it is cream of the crop. Everybody else can send kind of almost as many as they want to broadcasting. The Marine Corps got 2 slots. And this is years and years, and I don't know how it is now, but like literally, so classes of what, like 40 of us or something like that, and only 2 people get selected for broadcasting. So it's really, really hard to get.
Yeah. I think they extended it now. I think it's wider now. It's not just 2. I think it's like almost a quarter of the class, not more.
Which I feel like how the career field has evolved. It's needed because it is so much of like, just social media and like the things that are done. It just makes sense to have that experience in your belt. And so you didn't get it. And your first duty station was only 30 minutes from where you grew up, DC. How was that? Were you excited to get Quantico? Did you want Quantico, or did you kind of want to go away from home?
No, so when they gave us that like wish list, our 3 options, I chose, my first option was the farthest thing away possible. I think I chose like Japan. Yeah, okay. And then the second choice was Quantico, for that exact reason. It's super close. And then my third one was, I believe it was somewhere in California, probably Camp Pendleton or something like that.
Yeah.
Out there. Once again, just getting far away. Like either I wanted to be super close or super far from everything I've ever been around. And they gave me Quantico, totally fine, because that helped out tremendously. I know where everything is. When the Marines wanted to go out and party or something like that, hey, I got you. Let's go. So it worked out for me. But I know a lot of other Marines, at least back then, I don't know how the view is now. Back then it was like, oh, Quantico is like where dreams go to die if you're a young Marine. You know, you don't want to go there. They're not deploying or anything, not deployable units. You know, but for me, I'm like, I don't really care about getting deployed too much as long as I'm getting the job, getting the education, I'm doing right. Totally fine by it. Yeah,
which
it
is
worked.
which is funny enough because at least workload wise at the time, nobody else in the Marine Corps was doing what we were doing at the capacity we were doing. Can you talk a little on that? Because it's kind of wild.
I honestly, I'm happy that it went that way in at least in the very beginning because it gave me. I already had a certain amount of work ethic, and then you add the Marine Corps training into it, doubled that work ethic, you know. And then when I got to Quantico and started doing the actual like paper and things like that, those actual stories. One, I loved it. Like I didn't think I would enjoy it as much as I did, and I think I wanted broadcasting at first. So I wanted to be kind of more in front of the camera, but being behind the camera is freaking awesome too. So I've learned that, and you know, I will say it threw me off a little bit because I think my first week there was some type of situation where we couldn't go to the actual work building, the public affairs building. So we were in the barracks working. I'm like, oh, this is cool. We can work from home. And then I was like, I think we have a picture somewhere of like my first couple of months there. And we were working in, I think,
Yeah, because it was all the black mold in Lejeune Hall. We weren't able to work in the building. The black mold was so severe that we were working from our barracks that also had black mold because you know the irony of the Marine Corps. But we had hot spots. We were like the joke was like we were deployed in Quantico because at that time
that's
that
what it was.
like nobody knew how to do that either, right?
Yep.
Like we at the beginning, I remember we had like what did we have? We had like formation 3 times a day, and then it dropped to like twice where it was like in the morning and in the evening, and we were all together so much anyway that it really wasn't like in regards to that it wasn't a big deal, especially like you and I think you and I spent more time together than anybody else because like it just like we went on so many stories together. We covered sports together a lot. We covered like random things, the times we almost got blown up because we were on the wrong range with the truck.
Yes. Yes, that was fun.
But like you were saying, it was uncomparable to what our peers were getting. We were one, it was the last newspaper of the Marine Corps, a weekly newspaper.
Yep. Quantico Century.
We were busting out 10 to 12 stories a week. Our
It was
peers were
like ridiculous. I'm so glad Staff Sergeant came and changed stuff up. And it was funny because we were just living that reality. When he came, he was just like, what's the quota? And he was like, quota, we're just busting out 5, 6, 7, 8 stories each person a week. And he's like, no, what are you doing? I loved it. It was just like, no, this is no structure, order, here you go. Which made it our work-life balance so much easier. I will say that. So much easier.
And you had this ability that everybody liked you, which being a journalist and trying to get Marines to tell you a story,
helps.
There were, and fairly so, a lot of Marines at some point had been screwed over by somebody who thought that they knew what they were talking about and wrote something wrong instead of having like, can you talk about that and how you like how were you, I mean it is your personality, but how were you able to like exhibit that because you didn't have an issue getting stories or getting Marines to interact with you in any capacity? How did you do that, like as a young, I mean, Lance Corporal?
True. It was a little difficult in the very beginning because I'm an introvert, so I don't even like talking to people all most of the time. So I had to do my little code switch, and but also like you said, they've been burned previously by other porters, you know, before, so they were definitely a little hesitant in the beginning. But I think after reading a few of my first stories and seeing that I'm not against anybody or trying to do anything random, it helped, and also quoting them directly helped because I heard there were a lot of misquotes before, and I'm like, no, no, no. So I always had my little recorder with me everywhere I went. You could never say I misquoted you, even though there was that one time during the turkey trot, I think he won that year, and the gentleman said, I think it's an officer, he said something about, oh, he's doing it for his, his wife and his stepson, and I put stepson, and he was upset. And I understand because I have a stepdaughter, but I call her my daughter. She's my daughter, and we retracted it and everything. But I'm like, here's the recording. He said stepson, but we still retracted it. And the next year, he gave me an interview again. I don't think he remembered me, but he gave me an interview again, so it worked out. But yeah, no, it was just having a good team, and then also it helped when the Marines that you were already working with, like yourself, like Papers, like Ramos, that were any of our civilian ones too, like Mike and Amisha, when they've already covered a story, they can always put your name in there. Hey, Corporal Jefferson's going to be by such and such, and it helped. Like whenever I needed to do a story that somehow went into the lane of emergency services, I hit you up, you know. And then luckily for me, also they started me with sports and recreation. So I was with the high school all the time in the first year and a half. I was with the clinic all the time doing those stories. So I had little B stories in the beginning. Y'all had the hardcore stories or the cool stories at first, which made sense. I just got there. And but I loved it because also being around the high schoolers, there's they would go back to their parents who are officers, who are all the people in the Marine Corps, and civilian section too, and they'd be like, oh yeah, he always does this. I never really had an issue going forward with getting interviews and things like that because they love it, especially the base sergeant major and the base commander. Oh man, go right upstairs. Hey guys, they love me, so it worked out. And even the times where, let's say, because you remember the Quantico High School boys team was not doing well, especially like the football team. Basketball was doing pretty okay. The football was not doing well, and it was hard covering those stories without making the students or the coach feel bad.
Yeah.
So I know that first year with the coach, he kind of let me do whatever because I didn't make them, I didn't hit it too hard with them. But the second coach that came in after him, he wasn't as inviting as the other one. So I had to work with him a little bit more. But in the end, it still worked out. And then of course we passed it on to Garcia and the other new ones when they came in a couple of years later. But yeah, it wasn't too bad.
And that's some of the challenges as a journalist in a very small community, because it is almost everybody knows everybody in some way, shape, or form. And so you're not only having to tell the Marine Corps story, but like you're saying, when you're covering like the sports in the high school, you also have to think about the impact of the tone of the story, right? You're a journalist. Like we are, especially in the military, it is just facts. It is not emotions. Like what we were writing was not editorial magazines and this. It was hard news, but I mean local news, right? I'm not saying it was anything. Sometimes it was cool, like covering the hurricane and that type of stuff. But to balance that, I think, again, put us so far above our peers when we're talking in journalism or public relations in general, because we're E3s, E2s, like you said, dealing with the base sergeant major and dealing with a bunch of like high ups, kids and stuff. And so can you kind of explain to me the structure of, because we mentioned it a little bit, like the beats and how that structure was for you and how it worked and how you expanded your portfolio and started telling more of the type of stories you wanted to?
Oh, yes. So I guess like I said, the first year was more sports and health. So that BC section. And then at Miss Carlock, oh, Mama Dog, she used to always make sure that if there was something significant happening, she kind of like picked the person she kind of wanted to go. And I remember she picked me for the Montfort Point Marines article, and they were doing it at the Marine Corps Museum. And honestly, I didn't really know that much about them. But that's a little training we had in recruit training. I didn't really know too much about them. And I'm glad she did it because I think, and she said hands down, that's probably one of my best articles ever. Ever. And Sergeant Zahn said the same thing at that time. And from there, I kind of just shot up and started doing actual regular stories, not just the side stories and main stories. The only thing I wasn't too big of a fan of is when towards like that third year when people started leaving, back then they were downsizing where all the Marines were switching out of public affairs and they had more civilians come in. And I think by the end it was just me and Staff Sergeant. She's gonna kill me. Oh my God.
Height?
Yes. It was just me and her. but it was this one story I wanted to do, and funny enough, it was about the mold, and it was a great story. Like I think NBC, CBS would pick it up immediately, but back then, to a certain degree, Quantico couldn't do no wrong at that time, so we couldn't broadcast those things. I had that article. I had people was like mention on everybody else. They were like, "Oh no, this department didn't do this yet, so that's why the mold still there. This department blaming this department." It was great, but in the end, Ms. Carlock was like, "Hey," and Sergeant Zahn was like, "Hey, you're too close to this story. You're too close to this story. We can't put this out there. We'll have everybody coming to Quantico. Say what y'all do." I think in the end, I think Sergeant Zahn actually wrote that story in the end. And it was a good story. It just wasn't the way I wanted to broadcast because I saw it as a personal problem, which it was.
We were living in it.
Yeah, you can't have mold and you're just living in it like it's a regular day,
And we were getting sick all the time, and we were having implications and I won't go too far off a track, but like when I started having those complex migraines and then years later I did the research, I can almost guarantee it's because we lived in black mold. Because when you look at what black mold does, one of the things it does is it like heightens migraines, or it does whatever with migraines. And remember, I never had that issue until like probably a year and a half from living in straight black mold. Because like I said, it was the building we worked in, and then they fixed it. But then they never fixed the barracks, to the point of, do you remember, I think it was when Moses would be on duty, she would take sticky notes. Or you weren't there when Moses was there, were you?
I got there and she left maybe like a little less than a year later.
Okay, well, when she was on duty, she would literally go through and put sticky notes and write mold and write it in the green logbook, and just like this is ridiculous, we shouldn't be living in this type thing. But you're right. Again, one of the challenges of being, combat correspondent is like when you're too close to the story, it's just a challenge. But I like to hear, and I think it's important that other people hear, that the story was still told. The story still was published.
Mm-hmm.
The emotion was taken out of it. Somebody else wrote it so that the emotion could be taken out of it, because at the core, that's what our job was supposed to be. Our emotions were not supposed to go in the stories, because we were supposed to tell the stories of Marines. And so I think that's important to note. And the fact that, again, you as still a young person in the career field, like, yeah, it sucks, but you were like, okay, I get it.
Yep, that's all it was. And they did eventually move everybody out of that building at Singleton Hall and move them to the one, if you're facing the building, the one to the right. And I was living there for maybe like 6 or 7 months, and he moved us right back to it again after the mold was gone.
Well, we moved multiple times. Yeah. Multiple times. I feel like that could be a whole discussion on its own, though. So what was like your favorite story you covered? You said the Mount from Point Marines, but maybe something that was a little more like regular or photo heavy, or just something like you got to go out on the range like quite a bit and do a lot of like cool stuff. And I feel like you partnered with more Marines than anybody else when it came to like stories. You did very well working with people and finding those stories that were so big that it was like, I can't do this on my own. Which again, I think speaks volumes of like the experience and the like you were just really like above on the like just whole concept of like how to cover the stories. So what was some of your favorite moments or stories like that?
Ooh, plenty. Like just from each year, like whether it was the high school, because I love children, so I love being around them, and just going on there like their away games was freaking awesome. Going to bus with them, get those stories. I used to love it. Whether they won or lost, it was still like camaraderie, and I loved it with them. And also covering the base sergeant major's daughter gave me a little bit more brownie points too, so that helped out tremendously. Getting those shots. Also, she was an awesome player too. You got to factor that in. When like she was the base sergeant major's daughter, so she got to just play.
No, she was good.
Awesome player, yeah. So it wasn't just favoritism or anything like that. What else? Getting more to the main stories. I stayed away from emergency services while you were there because that was your stuff. I was like, nope, Bartley got it.
Yeah, PMO and fire was mine. Nobody could argue with me. They were mine. Chief Loving, remember we had the radio, so Jefferson and I shared an office for a long time. It was great when he was doing the media relations and I was doing community relations. And I had established, like, nobody could come in and take security battalion for me because I had established a relationship where we had a radio in our office that I would just listen to. And if things would happen, I would just show up.
As a lot of reporters do.
Yeah.
Supposed to do. So I loved it. I loved it. But I can't think of any. I'm trying to think other stories that there were so many. And sometimes I'll even go back to Denfo, not Denfo, what's it called, the Defense Net online where you can see all your old
And read them.
oh my God. I mostly just go through the photos. The
Yeah.
photos I were like amazing in hindsight. I'm like, oh my goodness.
They were.
And I loved every second of it. But also, and I will say about public affairs, which I'll tell people because I'll do a couple of seminars and things for like younger kids or children in like the penitentiary. And I let them know, like, hey, this is a route you can take. You don't have to go to war. You don't have to fight anybody. Like, there are so many jobs in the civilian sector that are in the military and they transfer over, you know. And I don't know, public affairs really gave me I feel like it gave me, really, goodness. Public affairs, I feel like it shaped me in a way that I wouldn't have gotten anywhere else without something dramatic happening. And of course, Marine Corps is dramatic in every sense of the word. So you get on them yellow footsteps, it's dramatic.
Trauma bonding all over.
There it is. That's all it is, trauma bonding. That's exactly what it is right there.
It's Hello, listeners. The Oath We Took podcast can now be heard on Wreaths Across America Radio. Download the iHeartRadio app and tune in to Wreaths Across America radio station every Monday at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. As always, I challenge you to not think a Marine, but listen to their stories instead. Hello, listeners. The Oath We Took podcast can now be heard on Wreaths Across America Radio. Download the iHeartRadio app and tune in. And we've talked about, you as a journalist, but then you took over as media relations. Like, you ran an entire media program for a base that had a ton of media interaction. How was that? I mean, you even met an NFL. I don't remember who it even was because I know nothing about football. I was there. I met him, but I couldn't tell you who he was. So can you tell me how that switch was from being a journalist to then running an entire media program at a base and some of the things you dealt with?
It was like it was fun, but it was a little nerve-wracking in the beginning because remember back then, I don't think we even had we had a Facebook, but it wasn't the best. We had to re-amp that. And I think you started the Pinterest, I believe.
Yeah, so Quantico was, if not the first, one of the first bases to have social media, period. Yeah. So we were the experimentals. We were like, there was as there is in government in general, but there was a lot of red tape and a lot of questions, and we knew how to work it, right? And in Villiard's episode, he talked about it, how he was like, we did nothing. Our Marines, you guys were the ones who were like, this is how social media works. So yeah, there was a lot of challenges though, because it was like, well, we know this works. And it was like, well, you can't do that. And it's like, but this is how it operates. And so yeah, there was a lot of that.
It was fun though. I wasn't like, as we started developing everything, because we did Facebook, we did Pinterest, we did, what was it?
Twitter.
Oh, Twitter. It was Twitter. And I feel like we did something else, but I can't. Was Instagram a thing yet or no?
I don't think we did Instagram, but we were using Hootsuite. And I think that was the thing, is nobody else had used Hootsuite either. And so we did a lot in that platform to figure out a process. And I remember us sharing it with like a lot of people down the line. I feel like a lot of people asked us how we operated, which again, I forgot that until Villiard brought it up, because now social media is part of everything, right? Like,
kind of do it now. So, but no, it was super fun, and I enjoyed it. And I love that our officers like Villiard and Sullivan, they gave us free range overall. Like occasionally they'll pull us back, but overall, like 95% of the time, it's like, hey, do what you got to do. And we started making our little small posts, like where is Sergeant Bulldog this week, and little things like that. I used to love those. I think only one time I got frustrated, and it was twice. The first time was when we had, what was that called? Oh no, oh no. It was the one that was the base shooting.
The
Yeah,
active shooter. Yeah.
the suicide thing.
Yeah.
That, that and it wasn't because of the media, because if anything gave us training about emergency situations,
Yeah.
so we learned a lot that week.
We did.
Especially answering all those media queries and having Sullivan go out there and prep his speech and things like that. It was a lot. We had a lot of training for that. But they used the picture for the gentleman that was doing the shooting. They used the picture I took of him during one of my OCS augmentation situations. It was a great picture. He was teaching one of I think the Wharton School of Business. I know every yearish OCS, Officer Candidate School, they would teach the Wharton School to go out there and do officer training, just to see how it is and things like that. And it was a great picture, but they use that picture everywhere. If you Google it right now, it's like, oh my God. And of course, they give you credit automatically at the bottom. So
Yeah, I don't want my name associated with this in any
yeah,
capacity. Yeah.
national, but I don't want my name associated with it. So that was a little, and then goodness, it was another situation. Can't think of it right now. I'll bring it back up later. It's gonna
Oh
come
yeah.
back.
Who was the most famous? Was the NFL? It was the quarterback, right? Tell me about why the NFL quarterback came to Quantico and what that experience was and your role with it.
Oh, Russell Wilson. Yes.
Russell Wilson.
Yes, when I was doing, I think I was Comrell at that time. So I was doing all those. It was like anytime somebody came on base, they pretty much had to go through me or the civilian gentleman. I can't remember his name right now. I loved him as well.
Yes. Oh gosh. Okay. Yeah.
I think
Yes.
the Barry. I loved him. Anytime you come on base, you're talking to him or you're talking to me. And Russell Wilson, this is right the year before he won his first Super Bowl with the Seahawks. He came to us and he was so just graceful. Like he was awesome. He wasn't like an a-hole or anything. He was really down to earth. And I remember one big thing where he had a contract at the time. He could only sign a certain type of football, where that maker was. And he said, "Hey, for these kids, I got you." And I remember his publicist was like, "Hey, you can't do that." He's like, "No, I'm doing this." And I was like, "That's my man right there." Ever since that day, I was like, "I love this guy."
And he came to do the O course, right? Like they did a photo shoot on the O course.
Yes, he was doing a article with GQ magazine.
So random, right? GQ magazine and Russell Wilson at Marine Corps Base Quantico.
He was doing really well. Like he pretty much conquered that course. Like it wasn't too bad at all. Of course, he didn't do it like the full timing of the situation, but
yeah,
he was like killing it. I was like, oh man, this man he might have another career after this.
And then I remember him afterwards, because obviously there was a group of us, like pretty much all the public affairs were there. There was some combat camera there, but we were just hanging out. We weren't weren't doing anything. None of us were trying to meet him. And he came over and introduced himself to all of us, which was, I think, really, really cool. Because again, being public affairs, I feel like we're in that realm enough where we don't feel the need to try to meet people, but obviously there's a lot of support that's needed at these type of events. So we were there not expecting to meet him, and everyone did. And it was just like, oh, this is kind of cool. I have I have no idea who you are. It's not hitting the same, but awesome still. So while you were in, you also towards the end were dealing with a lot of medical issues. Can you talk a little about that and how that impacted your career?
When I say I really wish I paid a little bit more attention to people that were talking to me, like Mr. Anderson, rest in peace. He tell me all the time, "Hey, I know you're gonna probably get out, in a few years, whatever. Go to medical, file for these things, blah 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 blah." And he would tell me, and I'd be like, "Yeah." And I did for some things, but not the things I should have, like CPAP, sleep apnea. I should have definitely applied for that. Why I didn't, I have no clue. I remember my roommate, Harrison, would tell me all the time, "Bro, you are snoring like crazy. Like it's ridiculous." And
you could hear you walking in the hall. Literally, you could hear you walking in the hall. And it would be like, "Yep, I know Jefferson's here. No worries, he's here."
But I never thought about it. I was like, "Oh, it's just regular snoring." And then literally when I got out, maybe 6, 7 months later, I got the test. And when I say that, like, I was in there for those sleep tests about 11 o'clock at night. I was sleeping for maybe like 15, 20 minutes. When the VA gentleman, when I say he like rushed through that door, was like shaking, like, hey, you okay? You okay? Like, yeah, yeah. He was like, you were not breathing at all. I was like, oh God. So they immediately was like, yeah, CPAP machine, here you go. Don't die. And like I said, when you're asleep, you don't know that you're not breathing.
Yeah. But
And
again, here's another result of living in black mold, and black mold by the VA standards is not considered toxic. It's not toxic exposure. It's
craziness. I definitely tried to apply. They were like, "Ooh, if only you applied a year before you got out." It's like it's not like you can do it like 6 months before you get out. You had a whole year prior to all your medical stuff that I had to be in before you got out. Which I didn't know that. Like that wasn't training they gave us at that time. You know, when you're outboarding, and by the time you're outboarding, it's too late anyway.
Yeah, so, I mean the stress of, even though you were 30 minutes from home transitioning, and again, like you mentioned earlier, your transition was really unique because Quantico was getting rid of all of its public affairs. And so we, like, instead of having an individual going away, we had this mass going away where like 10 of us, like each of us had to give, like, I got you your going away gift. Like it was like this crazy, like so many of us were leaving that you didn't even have the support system that you would normally have, which still isn't great because people who aren't transitioning just do not understand the magnitude of transition. I will stay on that ledge forever, and argue me all you want. You ain't going to win. If you haven't transitioned, you do not understand like the magnitude, the mental, physical, and emotional impact of transition.
And that's just us on the basic level of transition. We're not talking about like if you were overseas in a war or something like that. That's a whole different process.
Yes.
Oh yeah. It's a lot.
So how was that transition for you? Because essentially you were alone. Like how did you do it?
Honestly, I'm not gonna lie to you. At that time, it was a couple of things. One, I was about 6 months, towards getting out. I was ready to go. I was like, I'm tired. I can't run anymore because my left leg and ankle are all jacked up. So I had to get out regardless. I had no choice but to get out medically. Which, if you are going to get out, medical retirement if you can, every single time. So I'm glad I got out medically, but it was just like, it was a hassle just going through all the VA stuff, trying to get them to sign off on things. And then I will say headquarters wasn't too bad because we knew that's the great thing about public affairs. We knew everybody. The post office with Tillman, admin, everybody. So the good thing is I didn't have to work as hard as I feel like most Marines would have had to work to get their stuff. Because everybody's like, oh yeah, I got you, bro. I just sent a quick text. Oh, you have to go to the building, so that helped tremendously knowing a lot of admin. And people in what's that facility? Was it gear
supply or
yeah. Your stuff. When I say, man, I forgot at least 2 things I couldn't find. And they were like, my man.
And then you had Ramos, who had a trunk full of what you need. Flax, Kevlar, like what you need, I got you.
They had a whole department store. Anywhere he went, he was ready. Any store he had to cover, like, oh, cool.
Gear drift is a gift.
He was ready. I was like, my man. Oh, goodness. But besides that, like, it was, like I said, for the average Marine or service member, it's pretty difficult. But for me, it wasn't too bad because I had the right people in my ear. And then I had just knowing them just from the stories and just from the barracks and things like that. So it wasn't too bad for me, but it's case by case, but it can be difficult, including if you don't know what you want to do after you leave, or you don't, or you got to move, like you said, like California, from freaking Quantico. That's a whole different. Where me down the street, I think I moved I took like 2 trips back and forth to DC to Quantico, and I was done moving.
Fun.
It was not that bad for me, luckily.
And did you go straight to school after you got out?
That was another thing, because they told me I could fight to get more. They only gave me 50% disability. They gave me 20% DOD, which you needed 30% at that time for medical, well, for like retirement. So I was pissed off about that. And then they gave me 50% VA. And I was a little like, 50%? They told me I could fight it, but school started in DC like January like 5th or something like that.
Yeah.
And I was getting out like the last day of December. So it was like I can get out and then go right to school, or I can hold off, skip school for no another semester and see if the Marine Corps will let me do whatever, whatever. And I was like, I'm just gonna get out. I'm ready for school. I couldn't really do school. Like I know the goal was to do school while I was in because it's free, of course. But with public affairs, 24 hours. I mean, I remember getting calls like 2, 3 in the morning, like, hey, there's a brush fire. You and Kickers run out there right now. You know what I'm saying? Oh, it's a hurricane. Or I remember the thing where and I'm pretty sure he recovered, but a little kid, I remember he got crushed by the family TV.
Yes.
And that was the first seen a medical helicopter ever come on base. And I remember they told me, hey, great story, but we can't even publish this. And I had photos of them like stretching him to the helicopter. It's like, yeah, we can't do that, bro. Like any other news thing we could have did it, but Chronicle once again, there were certain aspects we just didn't want to put in the paper, and I understood that part.
And especially a child and being cognizant of that.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna cut that piece out because I don't know where my mind just went. I had something and then it just completely disappeared. Yes. So you got like 5 degrees or something crazy. You went back to school and you just kept going to school and going to school, right? Like, you got what you wanted out of the GI Bill, right? I mean, you tell me about how much schooling you were going to while you were working full time too, right?
So when I got out, I went to the University of District of Columbia, and I went full time, like straight out the back, full time. And I had a bar job when I started, and just doing security. And when I say that helped me tremendously, plus, luckily, with our VA benefits with the GI Bill, they were giving me maybe like 2,200 a month. And that was, of course, after paying all of my school off already, books, fees, all that stuff. So it helped tremendously. And then me living at home at the time, I was just stacking money at that point. I was falling out. I loved it. But, they paid for my first degree, which was the political science, as I bachelor's in that. Then they paid for my mass media bachelor's. Next, I went for a master's. The problem kicked in the second month in for 2 reasons. One, and in hindsight, I could just did what most people did. I could just went to like an online school or whatever and crushed it easy because it wouldn't have been hard at all. But me being me, I was like, no, I gotta go to a credit school. I gotta go in person to a certain degree. I gotta do this. I gotta do this. I gotta do this because that's just my standard for myself. And when I say I picked Liberty University. And don't get me wrong, it's a good school, great football team, things like that. But I didn't realize how religious the school was. It's literally a religion-based school. And I knew it was a little bit, but I didn't know how much, because it was enough that they had, for every paper I wrote, I had to put a Bible verse in there that matched whatever I was writing. And when I say I would write like a 10-page, 15-page paper and be done, and then I'm like still waiting 30 or 45 minutes trying to figure out what quote I can put in this thing. It was just a lot. And then suddenly my anxiety, mental health started crumbling. It got to a point I couldn't even get to a laptop without my hands trembling. And I was like, yep, can't do it anymore. Called the VA, they let me know what to do. They charged me initially $800 for that full course, but then they took it off like a year later. It's like, hey, don't worry about it, you're good. The VA is going to cover that. So luckily that worked out for me. But I really do want to go back and get a master's eventually. I just don't know the time frame at this point. Being what 30, how old am I? 32, 30. I'm 33. But
don't ask me. I think we'll be 34 this year.
So I'm weighing my options. Plus my fiance wants to of course have a baby sooner or later, and we want to get a house. So it's a lot right now. So I'm like, let's figure out what we're going to do, step by step by step. It's a lot.
Oh, man, that got me excited. So where are you now, and what are you doing now with life? Oh, you just mentioned that you're going to be trying for a baby soon and you're getting married soon and all of that awesomeness. Where are you professionally and what are you doing? I mean, you mentioned earlier you're doing a lot of volunteer work and talking to young kids as well, but what are some of those things that you are doing now?
So I was working. So after my bar job, I had a job with GW Hospital, George Washington University Hospital in Washington D.C. Great hospital. And I did security, the SBO, Special Police Officer there from 2019 to 2022. And the only reason I even left that job is because once again, mental health. Tackling people on like a weekly basis, almost getting stabbed by people on a weekly basis, getting people's blood on you every other day, seeing dead bodies in the morgue, dude, just the calamity of an ER and seeing babies in the NICU, like certain things I feel like get, you shouldn't have to adapt to and get used to because then you're desensitized to it. Because now when I see somebody pass away, it doesn't affect me like it would have right after the Marine Corps. It's just like, oh, okay, regular day. So I left that job for my mental health, took a nice little hit financially for my new job where I'm at now. But I've been there for a year and a half and I love it. I've gotten promoted twice. I've got 2 bonuses in a year and a half as well. I just moved to Reston, Virginia. So I wasn't Silver Spring. I literally moved like about 2 weeks ago with my fiance. So and we're loving it out here. Like it's so like clean and it's expensive, but it's just nice. I have a Wegmans in my apartment now. Like, oh my God.
Oh, Wegmans.
But like even this room I'm in now, like we have what do you call it, co-working rooms. Use anytime. Like it's so convenient. So I'm loving it. My job, I'm loving it. I actually just made employee of the quarter for the northeast part of the country. That was last week they gave me that. I got a nice little bonus on top of that. So right now I'm a area manager for 2 areas, resident license for my company. We sell co-working spaces and manage co-working spaces. So you'll just see me do mostly billing in my section now, but it's just when I say I found a job that they promote work-life balances. They give you PTO, of course. They give you a sick leave. They give you a mental health day. They give you a charity day, and it's something else they give us now. Like never had these benefits before, and I got the FSA benefits now. I want to spend money out of pocket for all the medical supplies I used to have. Like I'm loving the position I'm in. Don't get me wrong. If you see a job come up, sis, and they paying like 80 plus, let me know. But if not, I'm totally fine where I'm at. I think it's probably the most peaceful I've had with a job since probably the Marine Corps.
And I think that that's something that, especially in transition or in life, I think sometimes we kind of get bogged down of like, it's not always about the money, right? Like that salary is not like the end all be all. I had a similar situation when I worked at Purdue. It was the first time that work-life balance was forced on me. And I didn't have a laptop because I wasn't allowed to do work at home. I worked from 7 to 4, right?
Yeah.
My boss didn't call me. My boss didn't text me. And I was almost like, I don't even know how to operate in this capacity. I have so much free time. Yeah. And so I do think that that's something that's very, very important. And I don't know if it's like our generation or what it is, but I feel like there's so many of us that are finally getting to that point. Like, oh, I don't need to like work myself to the breaking point, essentially. Is there anything that we didn't talk about that you would like to talk about?
We already covered it, but for any Marine that's still active or serving still active, once again, if you're going to get out, medical or retirement or both if possible. Don't just get out and like, I did my 4 years, 8 years, whatever. I'll just try to transition, whatever. Have something as a backup. When I say this extra, because I went from 50 to 80%, trying to get that 100 right now, that extra 19, 20 a month. Oh my God. I wouldn't know what to do without it, to be honest with you. I don't know where I'd be with it.
And here's the other thing. You like, because again, we weren't deployed. So I think there's a hard moment where you're like, but I wasn't deployed and there's people who are worse off than me.
Facts.
You have to stop that mindset. I heard a quote the other day that it was like every veteran pays with their life, some in a moment and some throughout their lifetime. You've paid your dues. You deserve to be taken care of. You deserve to get the healthcare you need. And I go to the VA a lot too. I've had good and bad experiences, but it still doesn't cover everything. And especially if you want more holistic approach, the VA is hard to get those things. And so, yes, document, go to medical, everything, and fight for it, because you earned it. That you took the oath.
Exactly.
You were willing to give your life.
Yep.
Point blank.
I mean, and just because you feel like, oh, I don't have anything wrong with me now, everything's totally fine, doesn't mean things won't progress later.
For sure.
They just diagnosed, among the many things I have, lower body injuries and whatever. They just said, hey, we think you have what they call it. They think I have PTSD now. Apparently, they think I have what's it called, depressive something disorder, and something else, anxiety, like 3 different things. And I'm like, to me, this is just me living regular life. I didn't know these were symptoms of these things, But if they are, please treat me for it and give me my money too, because it's most likely it came from the Marine Corps.
Well, yeah. And that's the thing. You had how many years in the Marine Corps learning to adapt and just keep, and I think the pace of the Marine Corps too really masks a lot of the things, at least it did for me. And that once you then slow down, it just starts to hit you. And yeah.
And I will say too, like if you're still in and you feel like you have any problems, like not just for the VA purpose, just yourself personally. I remember, and it's probably like my second, third year in, Dias didn't come to work one day. And I was like, where's Dias at? Hey, and like, oh yeah, she went to the clinic and she's on take the day off. She's a little sick. And I was like, we get sick days? I never, it's like third year in, sis, didn't know we got sick days. I literally would come to work sniffling and like, yeah, whatever, covering stories. I didn't know we got sick days for 3 years. I
mean, it is command discretion though, because although you go to medical and get a sick shit, your command could still be like, no, you're
That's true. That's true.
But yes, but you do have the ability to go to a sick hall, potentially get that, shit. And then if your command doesn't allow you to go, you need to document that. And especially if issues occur. But we'll have a whole episode where I'll bring a group of previous in to really talk like VA, medical, mental, and kind of like, here's some suggestions and some things to do. I am going to ask my last question, which is, if you had to take the oath again, would you?
It depends the timeline. So would I do it now, knowing what I know now? No. Would I do it under any other president? Because during my time, it was from 2010 to 2014. That was all under Barack Obama. So during that time frame, totally fine. You know what I'm saying? I didn't have to go. I didn't have to go to war. Didn't have to do anything. It was great. But now the way politics are and things, I'd be a little too nervous to join because there's no consistency right now. And the way our country is currently going, we don't know where it's going. We're one of the youngest countries out here, and we haven't gone through what China's gone through over the centuries. We haven't gone through other countries that have been here longer than us. And I don't know what's going to happen, but I wouldn't recommend military quite yet right now for anything. So for me, probably not. But at the same time, you got to remember, just like I said, we had those little Mardet, if you really knew me moments. It's just case by case, depending on the person. Like that, I left because of a girl and because of finances for school. And if I still had those issues, that might lead me towards the military again. But I don't have any of those issues now, so would never do it again. But at the same time, if I didn't do it, I wouldn't have the lifelong friends I have now. I got you, Capers, bro. I got freaking everybody I love. I see them on Facebook all the time, Instagram all the time, and I know for a fact, and I hope they know too, that if they ever need me for anything, right here. That's the reason I didn't join a fraternity in college after the Marine Corps, because we already joined the best fraternity sorority ever. So it's no point of joining anything else. Anything else is lower. So. But yeah, no. If I had to do it again, knowing what I know now, back then, I would definitely. I got to see your face. I got to see Capers. I got to see Ramos. I got to see y'all. I cannot see y'all.
This is the Oath We Took podcast, and you just heard a piece of Jefferson's story. You now know one more Marine and one more piece of Marine Corps history. His sacrifices matter. His stories matter. Not every Marine story is the same. We didn't all join the Marine Corps for the same reason. What is the same is the oath that we all took. An oath that easily could have ended in death, and for some, it did. So listeners, instead of asking you to thank a Marine for their service, I am going to challenge you to continue to listen to their stories instead.